Want your holiday cards to really sparkle? Let's make it happen. Hey friends, it's Juliana Michaels. In this video, I'm sharing a Christmas card that sparkles and shines with the brand new Tim Holtz Distress Holiday products, Distress Texture Paste Twinkle and Distress Snowflakes. The Twinkle paste is a translucent gloss paste packed with glitter flecks, perfect for adding dimensional sparkle, while the Snowflake mix brings nostalgic wintry shine with glitter and mica flakes. I'll walk you step by step through creating the shimmering background with Distress inks and Twinkle paste, plus how to embellish with the snowflakes, including tips for getting them to stay perfectly in place. Now let's get into the making. So the stars of this project are going to be the new Distress mediums from Tim Holtz and Ranger, and we've got a new texture paste called Twinkle. That's just a translucent gloss paste. It's got some glitter flecks in it that give you a little bit of dimension and shine. This, in my opinion, has a little bit less glitter in it than the texture paste Sparkle. So if you like a little less shimmer, but you still like that glossy effect that you get with a translucent gloss paste, then this is for you. And then the other one is the Snowflakes, which is a combination of glitter and mica flakes that just adds a beautiful level of shimmer, shine, and texture. And you can really see that there with the mix of glitter and mica flakes. So if you don't have these products, feel free to play along with anything that you might have that's similar. So that could be some other kind of paste that already has a glitter or a shine to it, or if you've already got your own glitter or mica flakes, you could certainly play along with any of that as well. To make the background and the embellishments for this card, I'm going to be using a combination of stencils, stamps, and dies. I've got this stick stencil from Tim Holtz, and then a few dies here. Some of these are, actually I think all of these are retired at this point, but feel free to go through your stash and find similar ones. I know most of us have all different kinds of dies that we could use in place of things that are similar for sure. So I'm using this one here that's called Holiday Words and number 2. And I'm just using this for the sentiment. So you could also use a stamp if you wanted to. I've got this one called Cool Yule, and I'm going to be using the deer here. You can use any image for the focal point on this. I'm going to be using this one that's called Vault Festive Wreath, and I'm just using the wreath part of it, but you could also use the greenery pieces from this one instead of the ones here. But I'm using this one here called Holiday Mini Greens. But like I said, you could use the ones that come with this wreath or any greenery dies that you might have. You could use any wreath die you might have, or you could just do something totally different with these techniques and then embellish it how you want otherwise. And then the stamp set I'm going to be using is the Music and Advert stamp set, and I'm just going to be using this music note. So any kind of background stamp will work for this. As for the papers for this, I'm going to be working with distressed watercolor cardstock, working on the smooth side. I'm also going to be working with black cardstock, and I'll also be using the distressed watercolor cardstock for the die cuts. Now I'm not going to be going through how to spray the panels, but I'm going to be taking distressed watercolor cardstock and applying a distressed spray stain to that panel with a little bit of water, drying it with my heat tool, and then die cutting different shapes from different colors. So I'm doing one color per piece of paper, and I typically like to work on a small like A2 size or even just an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper cut in half. But any bigger than that, it just gets harder to manage and hold the paper while you're spraying it and drying it and all that. So the green colors I'm going to be working with are Forest Moss, Shabby Shutters, and Peeled Paint. I'm going to be using Aged Mahogany, Black Soot, and then I've got 3 different browns here. I've got Scorched Timber, Frayed Burlap, and Gathered Twigs. These are only being used to do the die cutting. If you don't want to do, create your own custom cardstock colors, you could also just use colored cardstock instead, which would be a lot faster. Another medium I'm going to be using is Distress ink, and I've got aged mahogany, barn door, saltwater taffy, twisted citron, and peeled paint. You could also use the oxide inks instead. You'll get a slightly different effect or look, but you feel free to switch those out if you like. And as far as the sprays go, you could also use oxide sprays to do the colored panels if you wanted as well. And for the stamping, I'm going to be using Archival ink and frayed burlap. You just need some sort of a light colored permanent ink. And then other than the new texture paste, Twinkle, and the Snowflakes, I'm also going to be using some GripMate translucent. Got some glossy accents, got some distress paint here in Lumberjack Plaid, just any kind of acrylic paint in a red color will work for this. And I've also got a glitter duster that's filled with the rock candy glitter. The first thing I'm going to do on the background is I've got a piece of distressed watercolor cardstock that I've cut down to 4 by 5 1/4 inches, and I'm going to place it in my stamping platform. You could use a sticky grid mat if you like. I just find this works for me. This is just a little bit of temporary adhesive, and I can stick that down into the center here. I'm working on the smooth side. And then I've got a background stamp. The one I'm using here is Music and Advert, but you could use any background stamp that you like. I just thought this music note stamp would be perfect for the holiday season and the card theme. So as you can see, I use that temporary adhesive. You could also use this, like I said, a sticky mat, because the stamp is larger than the paper. So just kind of some way to help hold that paper in place while you do your stamping. And then I'm just going to ink this up here with some frayed burlap Archival ink. So this is just a light brown permanent ink, which is, you want some sort of a permanent ink for this technique so that the image doesn't get blurred or bleed or anything. Now if you like that look, you could certainly use like a dye ink like Distress ink or the oxide inks. You're just going to get this image won't stay this crisp once we start doing some of the next layers. Next up, we're going to do some stenciling, and we're going to do quite a bit of stenciling. So I'm going to be using my GripMate here and this stencil from Tim Holtz, and it's, I guess technically designed to run perpendicular here, but I'm going to be using it at an angle on the paper. So, you just kind of, I'm going to start off with it going this angle here. If you're particular about everything being straight, you could use the grids and, get this at a specific angle. But the main thing I want to make sure of, because I'm going to be repeating this pattern and it has a repeat to it on the stencil, so I can start off on this side and then scoot it over to finish off the design across the whole page. The only thing you do need to make sure is that when you do position it on here, that you've got it far enough up so that you're getting both corners of the paper when you slide it up and down. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're planning on where to position the stencil there. So I'll go with it about there, and then we can use that to help hold it down. Now I'm going to be working with a variety of distress ink colors, and I would recommend using some sort of like masking tape. So it could be mint tape, it could be washi tape, to help mask off the different sections here. And this width of tape just is kind of almost perfect for this stencil because it fits right in between each of the designs. So I'm just going to start off with positioning some of this mint tape here on every other one of the stencil design. So that way I can't accidentally get ink into an area where I don't want it. Like I said, I'm going to be working with a variety of distress ink colors here. So I've got aged mahogany, saltwater taffy, barn door, Twisted Citron and peeled paint, and then I've got some blending brushes here. And then I'm also going to keep a paper towel here that I can kind of use to clean off the colors in between here as I'm going if I need to. So I'm going to start off here with the peeled paint and just kind of clean off my brush just a little bit before I get started. And then I'm going to apply peeled paint to this section here. And this next one is going to be barn door. So I'm going to just kind of write myself a little bit of a note. That's barn door. Then this will be the next green. And then this is going to be aged mahogany. This will be saltwater taffy, and then the barn door. And then I'm just going to repeat that, and then I'm going to alternate the greens in between these. So this is going to be peeled paint here, and then I'm going to do peeled paint on this one. You don't have to use as many colors as I'm using, or if you wanted to use different colors, you could switch these out. You know, obviously if you're not wanting to do Christmas themed cards, you could switch this out to, you know, whatever colors match your theme. I feel like kind of these stripes and this technique for this background could be used for a variety of backgrounds if you like. Clean that one off, and now we're going to do some Twisted Citron here in these middle ones. So there is our greens, and then I'm going to slide this over again, kind of line up with that previous grouping there, and then we can just repeat that inking. So now I'm going to do that Twisted Citron again. I went around and round with inking this. The first time I did it, I did each color separately and like had to reapply the tape in between, and it was like taking me forever. And then all of a sudden I thought of this idea, and I thought, oh, this would be kind of a good thing maybe to share with you guys, because it kind of makes it a little bit faster. You do have to kind of plan out what your colors are and that, but you know, once you get that sorted out, I think picking colors is always the slowest process when it comes to crafting and creating anyway. So there is all of our greens. So now we're gonna go back and position our stencil back in place where it was. So kind of just have to scoot it back, get it lined up, get it stuck back down on your mat, and then you can peel off your tape. And if you want, just reuse it on the next section. So I'm just going to slide each one of these over and cover over the green that we just did. And this tape seriously just fits almost perfectly in that opening. So you do need to make sure you get it, if you're using this stencil and you do have this tape, just need to make sure you get it lined up and not that you aren't covering up part of the stencil. Okay, so now we're going to use our reds, and I'm going to start off with barn door here. And I'm going to do barn door. Oh, we need one more piece here. There we go. Now we'll do barn door. And then the next one's going to be aged mahogany, and then saltwater taffy, and then we're going to do barn door again. So I'm just going to go ahead and ink that one up. And now we'll do aged mahogany. and then saltwater taffy. And we can just peel off what we've got stenciled there and slide it over. Now if you find that maybe you're getting some some ink wiping off your tape, like if you're using washi tape, you might need to replace this tape and get clean tape in between. Some of that's just going to depend on the type of tape. Like this is a porous type material, so the ink will dry on here, where some washi tapes, the ink might not really dry very well on there, and so then it's not going to, it's going to smear and might bleed and get you kind of a funky color that you weren't hoping for. All right, so we had this here. Now we're gonna slide over. Gonna line up again there. Do our saltwater taffy. So we already have that out. So it's this. So we've got barn door here. We're gonna do aged mahogany there. We're gonna do saltwater taffy here. We'll go here and do our aged mahogany. Clean that brush off just a little bit, just so it's not got so much of that aged mahogany on there, because it's kind of a dark color. And then we'll do the barn door here. And there's probably one more little smidget right there, I'm going to guess. Yeah. So we'll just slide that over. And that's a little bit more of the aged mahogany. So we'll go back into that. Just give that a little swipe there on the corner. And there is a look at our stenciled, multicolored stenciled background. So if you wanted to go back and like add another layer of ink on here to like darken things up a little bit, you could certainly do that. And if I didn't mention, you could also do this with the oxide inks. It just might give you just a slightly different look once we add the next level of mediums, but you could certainly do this with the oxide inks. And then now that we're finished with the inking, we're going to remove that masking tape or mint tape, whatever you might be using. And we're going to clean the stencil and our GripMate, if you're using one, or your craft mat, just to remove any of that excess ink. So now we're going to go ahead and put our paper back onto our GripMate, and we're going to take our clean stencil, and now we're going to play with the new texture paste Twinkle. So this is just a translucent gloss paste that's got little bits of glitter in it, just to give you a little bit of shimmer, shine, and texture. So it's very similar to the sparkle paste, in my opinion, but a little less shiny. So a little less sparkles in it. So for those of you that like a little bit of shimmer but not a lot of shimmer, this might be your preference. So we're going to get our stencil in place here, and I'm going to take a piece of mint tape just to be on the safe side and kind of run it along the edge here so I don't accidentally get it onto the area without the stencil. And then you can just take your palette knife. You can give this a little bit of a mix if you like, just to kind of make sure all that glitter is mixed in really good. And wipe off some of that excess. You don't need a ton. This is a pretty fluid paste. It's so you don't want a lot on your palette knife, and you don't want to push down with it too much, or you might get it underneath the stencil. If you're working with this sort of a stencil here, or something that's got a looser design on it where these pieces move a little bit, you really want to be careful and consider which way you're wiping with the paste. So for this one, I kind of like to follow the design, so working down the image like this, and then just lightly spreading that paste across the stencil, and I'm kind of holding it at a little bit of a 45-degree angle there, kind of like you're buttering your toast or icing a cake. And if you need a little bit more, just, you know, dip in there and get a little bit more if you need it. And I'm looking for just a nice smooth coverage over the whole entire stencil pattern here. A lot of times I don't fully cover the background. Like when I'm doing a stencil work, I don't fully use the entire stencil design, but for this particular card and design I am. So I'm just kind of going back and scooping off some of that excess, and you see what happened there. This is a wet medium and you're putting it onto a water reactive ink. So it will reactivate that ink and bleed onto your paste. So if you don't want to do what I just did, you don't want to wipe off of this and put it back in your jar, or it's going to contaminate that whole jar. So make sure if you do that, that you get in there, scoop it out real quick, and you know, wipe off that palette knife, clean that off, okay? Don't put it back into the jar. And now we are going to lift this up very gently. And then you're going to have to wait and let this dry to some level, and then you can do the rest of the stenciling for the background. So you're just going to let this dry for a little while and then slide this over. From my own experience, the dry time really depends upon the humidity where you live, the temperature where you live, and how thickly you applied the paste. So if you put this on super thick, it's going to take longer to dry. But you just want to let this air dry. You don't want to use your heat tool or anything to speed up the drying process, or you're going to cause the paste to bubble, which could add some cool texture if that's what you're going for, but it's not what I would recommend, and not what I'm going to be doing. But if you want to speed it up and don't mind what might happen, and that you won't have like a smooth surface, go for it. You also want to make sure you clean off that stencil in between so that you don't want to let that paste dry on there. And then I also recommend waiting until this is completely dry before you lay the stencil on there and do the rest of it. I tried to do it too fast the first time when I was practicing this, and you can see the stencil stuck to the paste and actually like peeled it off, which you could work with here because that's kind of in the center, and we're going to be covering some of that with the embellishments. But again, just something to keep in mind if you are trying to work quickly, make sure you give this enough time to dry. All right, so one thing you could do while you're waiting for that section of the background to dry, you can work on the embellishments for the card. So what I did is I took some distress spray stain and sprayed a panel of watercolor cardstock with some spray stain, a little bit of water, dried it, and then I used that to die cut the shapes. And so I've used forest moss, peeled paint, and shabby shutters for the colors here. And I'm going to add a little, just going to add a little bit of like winter interest to that using a combination of paint, glossy accents, and the new Snowflakes, glitter, and mica flakes. So this is just a mix of glitter and translucent mica that really adds a really beautiful sparkly finish to the die cuts. I'm also going to be working with a little bit of just plain glitter using the glitter duster as well. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some lumberjack plaid paint here. You can take whatever color you want with a red, because I'm just going to be using a paintbrush to color in the little berries on the end of this die cut, and it just adds a little pop of color and interest to the die cut. And so then I'm just going to keep coloring all these little berries here. And then once you're finished with the drying, you can just set this to the side to dry. While that's drying, I'm going to move on to the next die cuts here. And for that, I'm just going to take a little bit of some glossy accents and just kind of tap that on here and there. I'm not looking for anything perfect with this, just to get a little bit of this glossy accents down onto those little holly leaves. And I like using glossy accents for this because it is just a really wonderful adhesive for holding glitter in place. And then I'm just going to give this a little shake just to make sure all the mica and glitter are mixed together. And then I'm just going to tap this down into my jar here. And then you'll see there you've got just a little snow-covered hollyberry branch. Another option you could do if you wanted, you could also, you know, pour it over the top and tap it off like that. You're going to get probably more than what's actually going to stick on there. So you can always kind of just take your tweezers or fingers and kind of tap off some of the excess. And then just set this to the side and let it dry. Now, I feel like you probably get a little bit more glitter if you pour it over the top versus when I just tapped it in there. I feel like I just got more of the mica flakes. So, you know, you can kind of pick or choose which way you might want to go with it there. Another option for adhering the snowflakes is to use some translucent grit paste. And so you can just take your palette knife and apply some of that onto the branches. Now, fair warning, this is a pretty liquid medium and you're putting it onto a water reactive ink. Even though that's dry, it's not permanent. So this will kind of reactivate that ink, and you'll see like the paste will kind of start to turn a little bit green or whatever color you put it on top of. So again, just keep that in mind when you're dipping your palette knife back into the jar, that you don't have any of that on the palette knife so you don't contaminate your jar. But so you can just kind of play around with gooping that on there, getting some texture. And then while that is still wet, we can add on some of the snowflake glitter. So let's move that over here for a second. Clean this off. And then I'm just going to put down a piece of printer paper here to catch the excess glitter. And then I'm just going to pour on there this. So it's just another option of a way to apply the snowflakes. And so there you go. So you're going to get a little bit, you know, chunkier look with it, with that texture paste versus with the glossy accents. And this is going to dry clear, so it's not going to look quite as white as it is right now once that's completely dry. And yes, it's still glitter, so you are going to get glitter places that you didn't know glitter was going to be, so just kind of keep that in mind. So now with these little berries, I felt like this chunkiness from the mica flakes was just a little bit too much. So, but I did want to add a little bit of sparkle to them. So for these, I'm just going to put a drop of glossy accents on each of the berries. You don't have to do this part because, I mean, they look pretty cool with, you know, just having the colored berries on there. But I feel like this step just kind of takes this to the next level. So you add your glossy accents. And then while that is still wet, you're going to take your glitter duster or just the glitter, and you can just pour it on there or spray it on there. So I'm going to do this off camera real quick. And then once that's dry, you'll have you'll just have a little bit of a glitter effect on the berries. So then you can just continue adding the glossy accents and the glitter to the remaining berries. I also like that the glossy accents, because it will kind of hold its dimension and doesn't flatten out, it really adds to that berry effect as well. And then just set this to the side to dry, and you've got your greenery embellishments all winterized and ready to go. So then once this side of the paste is dry, you can line up the stencil again with the other part of the inked area, and then just apply some paste through that. Now to finish off embellishing the card, I used the Vault Festive Wreath. And just use the wreath die to cut out the wreath shape from some black cardstock. You could also, if you know, embellishment wise, if you wanted to use the greenery pieces that come with this die, you certainly could instead of the ones that I used. But the ones I did use are the mini holiday greenery. But you could use any greenery dies if you wanted. And then a couple of older ones as well that are retired too. This is called Cool Yule that I used the deer. And the sentiment I used is from this one called Holiday Words 2. I die cut these just like I did with the greenery. I took pieces of sprayed distressed watercolor cardstock and just cut out the various layers and pieces from different colors of cardstock. I used scorched timber for the base, and the head here is gathered twigs. I used aged mahogany for the scarf, and then for the antlers I used some frayed burlap, and then for the mustache and the glasses, which I've got those little die cuts here on a piece of mint tape just to keep them together so I don't lose them. I cut them from a piece of watercolor cardstock sprayed with black soot, but you could also just cut any of these from just solid colored cardstock if you wanted. So, you know, if you're wanting to save a little bit of time and speed up some of the creative process, you could easily do the die cutting with solid colored cardstock, and that would save you a lot of time. And then from there, it's just a matter of assembling the deer. And for the sentiment, I just die cut one of the words from some black cardstock, and I'm going to put a piece of white cardstock underneath there and then just trim it into a strip and adhere that onto the front of the card to finish it off with the sentiment. May your holiday crafting season be filled with creativity, sparkle, and joy. You'll find links to all of the products I use in the description box below, along with the visual supply list for a quick look at everything. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you gave it a thumbs up and subscribe for more crafty inspiration, tips, and techniques. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, stay crafty, my friend.